Yeah. So this is our final lecture. It's about error handling, like runtime errors, how to handle with it. So this is the last lecture that we are going to do today. So the schedule will go like this. So we have 2 hours lecture today, 12 to 2 p.m. Then that is our lecture. So then there's a 2 to 3. There's an announcement like there will be a tutorial for OOAD because Miss Nideshika has a missing tutorial that you have to complete it. So that is OOAD tutorial 2 to 3 p.m. That is there. So you can join that link in the OOAD Zoom link. And there's another case that will be like 3 to 5. We do the final. It's not actually final one. We are going to do a lab. That is the final lab for the exception handling. But after the final exam finishes, like all of your final exam finishes, the database connection lab I will be doing it a separate session. So make sure you participate after the final exam. So that means after like the end of the March, like the May. So then 3 to 5 we have the labs today. The labs of OOAP. And make sure there's a like if you're interested you can join that like there's a DBMS revision session that is going on 5 p.m. So 5 to like 6, I think that's 1 hour DBMS due. So you can try that one. So without being saying, like those who scored like less than like 13, like if you have RSS in front of your midterm marks, try to sit for the supplementary exam. So that will be starting on next week. And is there any batch ref, right? We can do a revision session on this last paper. Now, some of you asked me like, what is the structure of the final paper? If you can enroll to a course called Digital Library, uh, this Digital Library has some past papers that you can try it. You can try this 2019, the recent one, because we have physical lectures. After that, 20 years all online lectures. So take the year 1 semester to final papers and open. You can try to do the OOP final template in the digital library. So if you need more papers, you can get the 18 version, 17 version. Likewise, last 3 year physical papers, you can try to get them. So you can search in the Moodle digital library course. It's in free enrollment and get the past papers. We'll do a revision session. Uh, is there any batch ref that I can contact, because we can have a revision on the study week that we do the past paper completely from 2019, the complete paper we can discuss it. So just let me know as an email. So that is what we can discuss in the revision. So let's start to do the exception handling lecture, which is lecture number 13, final one. So let's try to understand what is an error. So we call it as exception. So this is actually a runtime problem. So the problem that you have seen so far, so you are the one of the batch representative, right? Just send me an email where you can get a free slot in the next week, and we will do a revision session that all can agree on online. So we'll do a past paper, so you can prepare for the final exam. Do the 2019 paper and come, then we can discuss the entire paper on that time. So let's start to create empty project. So just Maven project. Let's create a empty project. So while the project is creating, so once the project has been created, so remember the final paper is very easy if you do the 2019 paper. So I can guarantee you that. Do the 2019 paper and some practices, then it is easy. So now these are not runtime errors, right? For example, if you use a semicolon here or like this void v capital, these are not runtime errors. These are compile errors. So that is you have to fix before you run the code. So let me increase the font size so you can see it clearly. So let me increase to 80. Now you can see the problem is, so before you run the program, right click and run the file, you can see the problems in a ID. because the errors are directly visible. But there are some errors that you can't see before the execution of the program. One example I can show you is look at this example. One example is you can try to divide a number by 0. Yes. So let's see that kind of a problem. I'm taking a simple example. Integer k equal 5 divided by 2. And I'm going to print the k. So now if we ask this in the final exam paper, what will be your answer? Are we getting an error? Are we getting an output? So are we getting what kind of a result? Can someone try to guess it? Let me increase it further. So are we getting an error here? Or are we getting an output? So what will be the output that we can see in the screen? So k equal 5 divided by 2, and I'm going to print the k. So what will be the value? So what will be the value? If you divide 5 by 2, what is the answer? Anyone? Yeah, it's 2, right? Very good. It's 2 because we can't get the fraction point because this is not a like double division. We are dividing by integer value, so answer is in integer format. So you can run it and see. This is the output. So I can run it and see. When I run it, I will be able to compile the program, no problems. It's keeping and compiling, so no issues with that. So I get k is equal to 2. But I'm going to say what will happen if I put this into 0. Now what is the answer? What will be the output that will be visible to the screen? So what will be the output that will be printed to the screen here? Now earlier it's 2. Now, so what is the maths formula if you divide a value by 0? So one says it's 0. Any other answers? Now in maths, you know it's not 0, right? In mathematics, you can't get a number divided by 0. That is actually not defined. So this is actually, usually this should be closer to an infinity. But in math, if you open it in a scientific calculator, you can see this problem. Like if I divide 5 divided by 0, you get cannot divided by 0. This is a exception. See, cannot divide by 0. So that means you can't divide any number by 0. But when you try to divide it in a Java program, you get a big runtime error. So this is called exception. See, this kind of a fail to execute goal and a exception. See, it says exception in thread main Java arithmetic exception. This kind of longer message. So this is what we call it as a exception. So exception means runtime problem, runtime error. So the reason is when you compile it, no problems. The computer thinks this is a number, this is a number, so it's okay. But when you try to run it, okay, now you try to divide the value by a 0, which is not defined in mathematics. So you get a exception. So that is a runtime problem. One example. So then another example for this kind of exception is accessing an element of an array beyond its range. Let's see the second example. So this is the first example. So this is, we have to handle it by ourselves. We have to manually track the error because when you run it only, we can see the problem. Another type of error is, let's make it like this. I'm going to create an array. So we have done arrays in a week, right? So we can create an array like this, 1050. So what will be output? What will be your output that you can guess if I try to print A? Means you need to have semicolon. I'm going to print the A index number. So are we getting A3? So what will be the output? Can anyone guess this? If I try to print A3, So can I try to get the output? Is it 0? So what is the value if I try to print A3? Remember, this is the 0th element, this is first, this is the second element, third element is not there, right? So if I try to access A3, so you get a runtime exception. So that is only visible when you try to run the program. Now when you compile it, you can click the compile button by clicking the build project. So it's successfully building, no problems. It says success. Say it says build success. And now we get a bytecodes. But when I run the program, you can't print that value to the screen. The program stop execution. See, after this line, the program, it doesn't matter whether you print a follow, still it will not print it. Now if I try to print hi message, you can see after the exception, your program terminates. The hi part will not going to print. See, program fails, and you will not see the any of the things that you print after that exception. So that is the problem. So this kind of errors we need to tackle. So how to handle it? It's about our lecture today. So other than that, a user has entered an invalid data. So let's take another example. One main example in your midterm also, you have tried that. So you use scan class. So you have used scanner class, and we can ask integer a equal is let's create a scanner object. So you have to give the user input. Now imagine I'm expecting a user to enter a number, so that will be start next. Now, but instead of a number, I put let's say a float. So now this is a problem. So now when I run this program, they ask you to enter the integer input. That's why the cursor is blinking now. But if I put 4.5, so that is actually not a number of integer. Press enter, you get a again exception. See, it says input mismatch. The user incorrectly entered an date. So this is an example for user entered invalid data. So we are asking you to enter the integer values, but in your scanner class you put double. So how to handle this type of errors? That is another problem we have to deal. So in the labs today we will deal with that problem. So now, yeah, so those are the errors. And other than that, for example, if you try to read something from the hard drive, but suddenly like we write softwares that can read from the hard drives, like the databases servers. So sometimes your hard disk cannot read the data because the disk crashed. So in that case, those kind of errors also we have to handle. And you try to read files, but the file cannot be found because the file is deleted. And so you try to read the file, but the file is already finished. The end of the file is completed, but you try to read the file. So these are like hardware level errors. You can see this is hardware error, and these are like the user and the software level errors. Like the problem is the user. User try to print the value divided by 0. User try to access an array which is not there. And user try to enter the number instead of a like the integer value. Then these are hardware failures that you can't track. Like hard disk crash we can't predict. So let's file deleted accidentally. It can be a mistake or it can be some kind of a virus. So we have to handle these type of exception if you want to write a flawless programs. Let's see how to categorize exceptions. So like this is one of the past paper question, like exception, like describe 3 categories of exceptions. So if we ask a question like that in the exam, so you can say the first type is unchecked exception. So that means basically it's a user error or a program that cannot be seen by the program. So usually the first type of exception is created by the user. For example, in this program, the user created an exception. Why? You put 4.5 instead of integer. So that is a checked exception. So this is cannot be seen by the programmer. One example you can other see is if you try to file to be open, but the user deleted that file. So the programmer didn't see that the file is deleted by the user. So in that case, you can get an exception because you try to read a file, but the user deleted the file. So this exception you cannot ignore at the time of compilation, because if the user did a mistake, the program crashed. See here, this is an exception done by the user, because user try to supposed to enter a number, but here you put a float value. So float is not an integer. So in that case, the program crash. So that is why you get exception and crash. See, this is a crash. So we want to display a meaningful message to the user rather than big error like this, because user will not understand what is this name and plugin and the exception and util mismatch. So you have to say that you can't put a float numbers to the user. So this should be handled at the time of compilation. Let's see how to do that. So the second category is runtime exception. So usually this can be avoided by the programmer. So this runtime exception, one example is, now this is a user exception, right? They're done by the user. But if you try to create the developer, create a program like this. So create an array, simple array. So you create that array. After you created that array, you try to print it one by one. But the programmer have made a mistake by trying to print it the third element instead of the second. Now this is a mistake done by the programmer. It can avoid it. The programmer could easily avoid this kind of exception compared to the early one, because that is done by the user. User entered 4.6. Now this kind of exception also we cannot foresee in it. We have to usually these are ignored at the time of compilation. See, you can't, this we can ignore it. So the when you run only, you can see the problem. Early case, the program caused that, the problem caused by this user try to insert a 4.5 value instead of a integer. So this is an example for runtime exception. So it's like you try to read an array which is not that case. So this is the second type that you can see. So the last category is actually actual errors. These are not usually exception, we call it. These are like the problems that beyond the control of the user or the programmer. First two categories, like user type integer instead of a number, we can give an error message saying that you can't put a number and ask the user to enter it again. If the programmer did a mistake, like in the array example, the runtime exception, it is ignored. So when you run it, you can see that program made a mistake and that error. So that is also possible. But the third category, the errors, these are actually cannot seen by the programmer or user. So this is actually in your code, because you can rarely do anything about this error. One example is like you have a very limited stack in your RAM. So if your stack is overflowing, and you will be having an error. Okay. So this is actually ignored at time of compilation. So you can't do anything about it. One example is that hard disk crash here. There's hard disk crashing, and file is actually open but it cannot be found. It's deleted. You can't do anything about it. So it's like hardware level failures, network failures, power failures. Those things we can't handle it. So that is why these are real errors. So third category we can't do much about it, but first two categories we should be able to display some kind of a message to the user rather than showing an error message which is lengthy like this. So let's see how to understand these errors. The one example is that we discuss. So now, what will be the output? Can you guess it in the exam? Try to see this program and see what will be the output. Are we getting 0 here? Or are we getting please print me here? Or are we getting an exception? Which one we will be getting here? So try to run this program. So try to tell me. Very good, right? It is an exception. Yes, because of 3 divided by 0, it's exception. So do you think this after you print in the exception, this part will it print? please print me. This part will print it. Will it print that after that line? No. So that is the very good, right? So that is the issue. This line will never going to print because it's actually there's an error before that. So after that, the program completely stopped. So that is what we need to control. So you will get an error message like this to the screen. So like, let me practically do that. So I'm going to do it in the NetBeans ID. So I'm going to create an array. Sorry, not an array. Let's try to create integer a equal 3 divided by 0. So if I try to print a, let's please print me. Now you can see run it. This please print me part will not going to print. Instead of that, you get exception message. Let's copy this one to the screen. So something like this. You will get something like exception in thread main and Java like kind of exception divided by 0 and a package name and a folder name like that. So let's put that into our document like this one. You can see this is kind of a message you will be getting. So get java.lang.arithmetic expression divide by 0 and you get a program name .java and the line number. So this is what we call it as a default exception handler. So that means a default message that will be displayed when you got that error. So this is not a like a user friendly message to the end users. So we have to customize it. Otherwise, this is actually only understood by the developers. So what is the meaning of this is, this is a facility run by given by the Java virtual machine. So we call it as Java runtime. So they give an exception, that kind of a message to the user as a description. Like you get an exception and the class and what is the meaning and what is the file name, what is the line number. So you will get something called stack trace. So that means the collection of methods where the exception occurs. So you can see this is the stack trace. So divide by 0.main. So that is the method that we call. The main method is what we are calling. So it's actually the stack phrase we are going to print. So stack phrase is another keyword that we use. Collection or hierarchy of method when the exception is called. For example, if you call two methods, you will get two outputs. One example, let me show that. So here we get only one method because the exception is only occurred in the main method. But if I try to call it in another method like static void test, and if the error occurs in this method, and I just call it in my main method, you will say two stack. One is from the main method because we call from the main method. The other one is from the test method. Now you can see earlier we can only see the main method. See, the main method is the only stack we can see. So that is the only stack phrase. So one method that we call. But when you run it now, if you call one method calling another method and calling another method, now you can see two methods. Like one is from the test method where the actual error occurs, but that is called by the main method. So you will get two places where the collection of errors occurs. So that is what we call it as stack phrase. So it's collection of methods where we have the errors. Now, if you write two methods, you will get two lines. Now, since we have only one main method and print it on that line, so you will get only one stack phrase. So that is a meaningful message that we will be decoding. So let's see how to read this error later. But the main problem of this is this program will terminate regardless of how many lines you have. So the please print me part, you can't see, it's actually deleted. So you can't print this please print me part, it's not going to be working, it's deleted. So let's see how to track and like eliminate these kind of problems because this is a meaningful, it's not a meaningful message. Let's see how to customize it. So let's see what is really happen when an exception is actually occurs. So you can see that when an like exception occurs within a method, so you can see that the methods create something called an exception object and handle it off to the runtime system. It's like this. Now here there's an exception. So when this happens, the Java virtual machine will create something like this. So the class that is responsible for this error type is called arithmetic exception. So that is related to the arithmetic. So you can see that error category is arithmetic exception. So what they do is they create an object from this class. So the Java virtual machine be able to do that. So they create an arithmetic exception. So they create object related to the what kind of error. Like if you do a SQL exception, we'll do it after the like final exam when we get for your road project. There will be one lab that I will not do today. So we'll do it after the final exam for the practice of the like your database connection. So but arithmetic exception, you create an object from that and creating a new object like the scanner class, right? So they create an object from this arithmetic exception. So this is how you create a object. So this E object, so it can be any name, but it is automatically created by the Java virtual machine. So they create a arithmetic exception class object. So you can't see this physically the object is creating, but behind the scene that means the Java virtual machine will be creating an object and throw you to the screen. If you don't handle it, they just print the default message like the big, the large message. But if you handle it, they can react according to your specification. Let's see how to react to that guide. So we call this as throw in an exception. So when the exception is occurred like here, this will throw an exception. So your program throw an exception and create an object at line number 8. So you have to catch it. It's like a ball. You are going to throw it to someone that will be catching using a gloves. So same way. So the exception is thrown. You can catch it. You call it as code. So this exception object that is created contains some information about the error, like whether it is an arithmetic error, whether it is a SQL error, whether it is actually a runtime error, and it include the type and what will happen to the program when there occurs. It will keep some details about that. So that is what we need to see in a message. Let's try to decode an error message. Now what will happen if you try to print this? Are we getting any name here? Are we getting Roberts here, or are we getting an exception? Can anyone suggest here? So I have an array of names. So what will be the output? So if I try to print it, what will be the output? That's very good, right? So out of range, exception, yeah. So this is out of the range, right? Because the Robert and Wilha is 0 and 1. So you try to print number 2. So that is not in the line. So this is 0, this is 1. So you go and get a name called number 2. So you get exception message like this. Red color message. So depending on the ID, it's red or white. So in NetBeans, you get red color message. So the println above code causes an exception object to be thrown. So like you throw an exception to the system with the following message, like exception in main and this kind of a message, and you can get a line number and a type and see the program name. So let's try to decode the message. So let's see the meaning of this. So I want all of you to understand the meaning of it. So if you want to understand the meaning, you have to remember a template. So this is the template. So if you have Java 18 or 17, it doesn't matter. So all the errors are categorized into this template form. So if you can read the template, you can decode any message that you can see in the exception. So I'll give some time, about 5 to 10 minutes. Try to write this template. So you get a first exception class. After that, you put a colon and the additional description, and you get at message, class name, method name, file name, line number. So write this template. So then we are going to decode one by one. So with an example. So I'll give some times, about 10 minutes. I want you to take a piece of paper, or let's say you can take whatever the notings you have. Just write the format. So then we can do an exercises on this format. Yeah, we'll do it an online session. That's fine. We'll do it on the. I'll let you know the time. So we can do it on next Wednesday. So okay, right. So you can see this is the template. You have written that, right? So class, description, method, file name, and the line number. Now let's try to decode this. Right. Let's try to do a mini quiz. Let me show you that. So let me give you an example. So since you have written the template, let's take an example. So there are four errors that like four messages that you need to decode. So look at the screen now. So we can ask you now. Look at the format, right? So it says exception class. You have the class, additional description, method name, file name, and the line number. This is the format. You can see the colon sign and the at symbol. Now you get exception like this. Now try to decode this information. So I will give you about 10 minutes. What will be the answer for the 1, 2, 3, and 4? Look at the template and let me know. So there are 4 questions that you can answer in the like kind of exam paper. So what is the class and array index and the method, file, and the line number. So you can read there and try to decode the message. So you can refer to this exception format. So try to do it. I'll give time some time, like 10 minutes. So you can read the error, right? So it's very simple. Look at this. First template is what we can see in the question. What is the class of the exception? Right? So you can see if you see an error message, the first colon sign left section will be your exception that you can see. So what is the exception that you can see here? I have a colon sign here. This is a colon sign. Before the colon sign, this is actually my class. So what is my exception class? It is java.lang.array index out of bound exception. So this is the full package, like including the package name it shows, but the if you only need to show the exception class, that is only this array index out of bound exception. This is the package name, right? Java.lang is the package name. So that is how you decode the first section. So that is exception class. Likewise, can you try to read the other details? So I'll just give one help. So try to complete the rest of the questions. So we got one answer. I will come to that point. I want all of you to try that question as well. So let me give some time. So at 12:50 we'll start discussing it. So I'll give 10 minutes. Complete the entire thing because this kind of question might be there. Okay, anyone try the second question? So what is the array index which is out of bound? So we got one answer only. So in that case, the second is actually 2, right? So you can see the additional information about the exception is actually after that. So that is like what is the array index which is out of one. You can see the description here. So in this case, the description part is actually after the colon, which is 2. So you can say the number is 2 here. So then what method which throws the exception? You can read the method here. You can see the class method in the file using these numbers and the line number. So I think the answer I got here is actually correct. So that is line number 4. So this is the full answer that we have discussed so far. So the index which is out of bound is actually array index out of bound, that is the exception class. Then array index is number 2, which method is actually our main method. We can see the main method, and we can see what is the file which contain the method. We can see that is array exception dot java file, and finally the line number where is there is line number 4. So you can try to figure it out by looking at the example given there. Right, so now we know how to decode some errors, right? So we can see on any exception that we can see when you run it, you can decode the error like this. So this is the error. You copy this file and you can ask in the exam. Okay, so this is my exception. So what is the class? Now this time what is the class? What is the exception class that you can see? Now this is a little bit different, right? So where's the exception class? That is this one, right? Java.lang.arithmetic exception. So full name is that one, but if you want to only know the arithmetic exception, you can say arithmetic exception. So then additional information is actually you can't divide the value by 0. That is additional information. So then you can see what is the method by looking at this part. So this is the method name. So it's a full package name, right? So LK Slit Academy and Maven Project 7, that is the project I have created. And this is my entire project main method. And you can say this is the file name that I have created, project7.java. So that is the file that we have there, and the error is at line number 8. So where's the line number 8? So at line number 8, there's an exception. So you can see that line number 8 is this one. The exception is 3 divided by 0. So you should be able to decode an error based on the given exception message. But this is not a good message, right, that we can display to the user. So that is why we want to customize it, how to handle it. So that's what we can see. So apart from that, like what are the benefits of handling these errors in the Java project? because one of the main reason is you can't find errors and exceptions at compiler, because compiler can only track limited number of exceptions. So if you want to like separate error handling from the regular code, you can do this error handling part with exception framework. Yeah, you can see you track for errors like debugging. So you know debugging, right? So debugging means checking for like errors by going through line by line. So it's like the last week lecture, right? So you can do error detection, like reporting, handling, grouping, different type of errors. Like this is an arithmetic, that array index out of bound, SQL exceptions. Likewise, you can have many benefits. So we might ask you in the final paper, like list down some benefits of Java exception handling framework. So these are the advantages that you can try to see. Now these are the keywords that you want to remember when you call about exceptions. So when you get an exception like here, this is an exception that you can see. So we call it as exception is thrown. We call it as raised. So two keywords you can use, thrown or raised, when an exception occurs. So when you handle the exception, like when you like deal with, so you call it as caught an exception or handle it. So how to handle it, I will explain it in another few slides. But the code that we write to deal with exception, we call it as exception handler. So these are the keywords that you must remember in order to handle errors. So usually this is what happen when you throw an exception. So someone will throw at you, you have to handle it. So usually what we discussed in the beginning is the exceptions are generated by the system. So they automatically throw by the Java runtime system. So if you want to manually create an exception, you can use a throw keyword. So I'll give an example. So if you want to manually create an exception, it's very simple. Now currently this program doesn't have a problem, right? We have a first program, hello world. No errors with that. So when you run it, no exception. So there's no way that we can get an exception in this program. But if you want to have it, we can try to generate a manually created exception. So how to do it is very simple. Just create a object. Let's say doesn't matter, right? There's some point here. Let's see, if you want to generate a SQL exception, we can generate a customized error message, like customized exception, like error. So exception. We create an object from that, and we can just say throw this object exy. Now when you run it, like you can say it. Now here it says throws. Now here, if I throw here using this keyword, you have to use these keywords in the class. So throw. So I'll show example. So don't worry about the syntaxes here. Right, so semicolon. Did I made a mistake? Yes. Right. Now forget about the syntaxes, right? Now we just print hello world. Imagine if this part is not there, SQL exception and this creating object part is not there. It's a normal hello world program. Now usually this doesn't generate an error. It doesn't make any exceptions because it's a normal program. But if you want to manually generate it, still due to some reason, like I want to generate it because to test some programs, we can manually generate it by in front of the method. You have to specify what is the class you want to generate. Like early example, like we generate what is the class here is arithmetic exception. If you want, you can use that class. So if you want to generate an exception of SQL error, you can generate. So the advantage is we can customize the error type the way you like. Now when you run it, you can see this will generate a SQL exception. Run it and see. See, they generate SQL exception. Now, but there's no problem with the, we didn't create any SQL objects. Like we didn't create any SQL server connection. So likewise, but we generate an exception. So what we need to only do is create an object from that class and just write throw keyword. And in the, now you can't just directly throw it. We have to provide that exception types under throws keyword in your main method. So is this part clear to you? So this is how you create a custom generated errors. You can manually create an exception and throw it. Like if you don't like SQL exception, if you want to generate an arithmetic exception, you can just generate it. Arithmetic exception, and here you have to throw that exception. So now when you run it, this will throw a arithmetic exception. But there's no point here, right? There's no logic because we just printed hello world, but we get exception because that is a custom generated exception that we can throw to the system. Otherwise, if the errors that we discussed earlier, like you divide by 0, those are system generated. That is actually for real reason. But this is just for customized reason. So is that clear to you, all of you? Custom generated exceptions. So write this syntax. This is how you generate a customized exception. So this is our customized exception, custom generated exception. So write it down. If you want to customizely generate messages, you can generate like custom exceptions like arithmetic. So these are how you generate it custom way. So our user generated one. So usually you have to show the clauses out of the method must be specified in such by a throws keyword. So you can see how we use the throw keywords and throws keywords in our program. See, if we want to specify what kind of exception that will be generated, you have to use throws keyword. And if you want to say how to throw one single exception, you have to say throw single object. So, but this doesn't have any point, right? Because we just create an exception and throw it to you because just we can generate an error. But there should be a reason for that. So we'll see how to write logic for that later. But basic way of catching the exception is like when you throw an exception, you should be able to catch it and print a customized message rather than displaying a weird message like this. So that is why we should use a try and a catch block to handle those errors. So let's try a simple program. We don't need these throws and case for that. So now the problem is we have this 3 a equal 3 divided by 0. Now this part actually when you run it, you can see that as we generated the system default generated error message is like this. It's not a proper meaningful message. So if you want to handle this thrown one, so we want to quote it. So how to quote it is you have to use try catch block. So this is one of the easiest question in the final paper. If you want to handle this exception is you just surround it by the try and a catch block. And but you have to identify what is the correct error type. Now this is actually what is the class. Can you mention it? What is the error class? You have seen that before. So what is the exception class we have to catch? Very good. Arithmetic exception. So we have to use that class. So I can say arithmetic exception. So this is the class I'm going to catch it and create an object from that ex. So that is the object name. So I can just give any name you like and put a semicolon like curly brackets. That's it. We handle it. Now when we got an exception, you go to the catch block and print and message the way you like. I can say you cannot divide a number by 0. So now the advantage is earlier the program directly crashed. Now when you run it now, the difference is we don't get that weird message anymore. You get a meaningful, you cannot divide a number by 0. So is that clear? So this is the advantage of handling using a try catch, because when you have to have, so in the try block what we need to put is, we want to put the error code we want to test. So I want to test whether we got 3 divided by 0 successful. If you get a fail kind of exception, you go to the catch block. Like if you don't got any errors, you just continue, no problems. But if you got exception, you got to go to catch and print you cannot divide a number by 0. Now by looking at this, you can see the regular codes are in the try block, the error handling codes are in the catch area. So that is how you try to do it. It's the same thing. That is why when you develop an Android application, when you try to open like Facebook or WhatsApp, like without internet, you can get a error message say that there's no internet. So that is because there's an exception is thrown. That message is showing in a catch block. So that is how you show an error message if the internet is not there. Try catch block, simple try catch. So this is how you can handle an error. So if you can write this with the surrounding try catch, you will get the full marks. So but you need to identify the class name. If you write that is array index out of bound, that is wrong. So you have to say what is the proper class type. So whether it is arithmetic, whether it is array index, you have to mention that. So after that, you can put a clause called finally. So this is to execute. It doesn't matter whether you catch an error or not. This will anyway run. Run no matter. So if you want to write a code, if you have now this catch block will only execute if you have an error like exception. You try to divide the value by 0, you get exception, you print that. But even you have an error or not, both will reach the final statement at the end. So this will run no matter what. Anyway, it will be going to execute. So you can see when you run the file, you will be getting you cannot divide by 0 because this is an exception. But the final statement will be anyway going to be executed. So that is how you write a fully blown try catch statement to catch exceptions. So is that clear? So make a note of this. So this is how you write try catch blocks to catch errors in your program. So customize messages. So write it down. So this is how you try to catch an basic exceptions in your program. Try block that might be throwing the exception, and catch what will happen if the exception is try catch block. So the mechanism is like this. So whenever your code may get a trigger an exception, like if it is triggers, the normal code logic is placed in the try block. So after the try block, the code handle the exception should be arise. When you have error, it should be put in the catch block. So your normal code should write here like if condition, for loops, all normal logics you can write it in the try block. The exception of code like you can't print the message, like those kind of messages, you have to put it in the catch blocks. So that is the difference. So you can see that the first program we have decided is please print me part. I can see that if you try to print it arithmetic exception, you can print the catch in the kind of a block like this. So this is called arithmetic exception using the message. Now you can see a difference, right? Now here we just printed hard coded message. You cannot divide a number by 0. But if you want to print the system generated message and the stuck trace, you can use this object E and use the messages, the predefined messages given there. So likewise, you can try that. Rather than you can divide by 0, I can print it like this. So number that is not a like a good message. Like this is a meaningful message, but if you just print ex dot, like you can use the get courses. What is the reason behind that? And the stack trace. You can say tool string. These are the methods that you can try that. But if you get the message and try to print it, you can see the difference. So divide by 0 is actually the system generated message that we can get, but that is actually less meaningful compared to the customized message that we have written. So you can use both ways. You can use this method to generate the system generated message and print it. So if you want, you can generate other messages, right? Other than the get message, I can print the stack phrase. You can say get stack trace. So like the methods that we have there is like you can run it and see. So you can see this is the Java stack trace elements. You can print it. You can one by one print it. So then that one dot you can get the one message by one message. So that is also you can do that, or you can just print a custom message. That is more easy. So usually we don't recommend to generate a system generated message here. Just write a meaningful message. So message the courses. Likewise, you can try to print it in a program like this. So that is how you generate customized error messages. Okay, now let's do an activity together. Now this is actually uh, an sample question that we can ask you in the final exam. There's a program given like this. So what you need to do is, can you rewrite the program, put in try and catch blocks, identify what is the error type, and try to print it. So I'll give you about 10 minutes, like 1:10. We can discuss the answers. So write it down. So let's see who's going to see the answers. Let's start now. I'll give you about 10 to 15 minutes. Let's see the yeah. Now what you need to put is you need to put a try catch block and surround this code with the try catch. Try to do it. Okay, like so any answers that you have got here? You can just put it like this, right? Now this is the code. Imagine this is the code that we have to write. So let's see how to write it in try catch. There are some weird spaces, that is why you get like errors here. So like imagine this is the program. And you need to surround it by try catch. You can separate the normal code by the code that you might see as an exception. So you can see it using this. So imagine this is the program. So how to write a try catch? You can simply write it. Now the simple solution is you just put a surrounding try block for the entire section and a catch block for the here, and put this is an arithmetic exception because we try to divide the value by 0. Yeah, so the answer I got is correct, right? Yeah, arithmetic exception. You cannot divide by 0, so we can put like this. This is the simple solution. You can say like here, format the code. You can say cannot divide by 0 because you can see that 5 minus 5 is this. So if you be more intelligent, like rather than entire code's try catch, you can only put the try catch blocks to the relevant area. Like I can only cover up this part because other code you don't have any errors, right? These are just variable creation. So both answers are correct. You can put the try block to the relevant area or you can try block to the entire case, but this is more meaningful because this variable creation you don't get arithmetic exception. But here we get exception because if you put plus and minus 5, you might get 0 here. So this is the answer, the proper answer. Like you can put a try for the entire case, that is also correct. This is also another answer that we can show. Yeah, so make that meaning, write it down. If you want, you can try to put a multiple try catch as well, right? So for example, uh, there's another error type called arithmetic exception. Other than that, there's something called like something like this. So you create an array called A, and you try to access an incorrect index of an array because it's not there. So this kind of a logic, like for example, if you try to have a ninth element is equal to 75, this is also incorrect, but the type of exception that you get is actually not arithmetic, because when you try to run this code, so you can see it's not catched by the cannot divide by 0 error, because that is actually an array index out of bound. You can say another type of error, array index out of bound exception. So this is another type of Yeah, so we can say incorrect array index. You can put a final statement like that. So the point is you can put multiple catches for catching many type of errors. Like we only catch arithmetic errors, but if you want to catch like something like array index out of bound errors, which is not including in the array because our array is only 3 elements, but you try to access the ninth element like 10th element because this is 0 to 9 is mean 10th element. So we can print an exception multiple catch blocks. So one try multiple catch. So that is what we can try in this here example. You can put multiple catches like a switch case statement. You can put one try, another catch. Likewise, multiple catching exceptions for the program that we can give. Okay, let's try to use another example. Now this it has two type of errors, arithmetic and the other type. So I'll give again another 10 minutes. Try to figure it out. So try to complete this task. At 125 I'll be taking the answers. What you need to do is there's two catch blocks because one is for the array, other one is for the like index is not out of bound. So try to fix that error. Okay, so let's see any answers that you have written. So let's see how to put a multiple try catch. So this is the task number 2. So if you want to put multiple try catch for this section, so how do you do it? These are some weird errors. How to fix it. If you want to put multiple try catch, now you can see that this is an array section. We try to access an incorrect index in an array. So because A2 is not included, and this is actually to try to divide the value by 0. Right. So in that case, the both exception can be there. So what we can try to do is we can put a multiple try catch. So one try block for the entire section, we can catch it. So one is the array index out of bound exception, arithmetic, and the array index out of bound exception. So like this, we can catch different type of errors where we want to have array index bound exception. So you can create objects where you have like to have and print the errors. Say cannot divide by 0. We can say index is incorrect. Something like this. Yeah, so the answer given is correct, right? Your answer not anything. Yeah, it's the same answer, right? So make sure you give the meaningful messages. So that is how you can like show the exception types in this project. So full type of the exception we can see in the program like this. Right, so after that, there's something called exception classes and hierarchy. Like what we have used so far is this arithmetic exception and the other types like array index out of one. All are belong to the runtime category. Like there's a shortcut you can try to do rather than like catching them separately, like arithmetic exception, null pointers, number format, SQL error, like SQL exceptions. You can catch it using the superclass. So that means if you use this superclass called runtime exception and catch it, all the subclasses, all the categories will be caught. If I use this exception class, so including the SQL exception also, it will be able to catch, including the runtime, including the IO errors, and check exception. So if you catch it using a throwable class, all the type of errors and exception can be catched. Do you think this is a good approach? So that means like rather than writing this arithmetic separately, array index out of separately, we can use a super class called throwable, which is that is the main class of everything. Now you can see that when you catch it using the throwable class, you get an error. It's because it's already caught in the throwable class. So when you write a throwable class, it will catch all the type of errors. Now, do you think this is a good approach? Catching the exception using the super class? Because we don't have to write separate catch blocks. What is the disadvantage? If I catch it using the throwable, all the errors can be catched. What is the disadvantage? Because we don't recommend you to do this. Even when you go to the interview, also they don't like they check that. So you have to write specific exception like arithmetic, null pointer separately rather than catching using the super class. So in the final exam also, if you write to catch it using a throwable or a exception super classes, you will lose some marks because it's not actually customized. The reason is you can't really say what type of exception. If you see in the throwable class, the disadvantage it catch all the errors. We can't figure out whether it's a runtime error, whether it is arithmetic, whether it's a null pointer, because we can't know that because the super class will handle all the things. So that is why it's advisable not to use the super class, but this is the order of the exception classes hierarchy. So if you don't have any choices, if you don't know what to do, you can use the throwable and catch it. But we can't figure out what type of the exception based on the super class. But if you use the child classes like SQL exception, arithmetic, we know that It's actually something related to numbers, something related to SQL. So that is how you catch exception classes in the hierarchy. Is that clear? Something like this. See, when you catch using the superclass, you will not be able to see, you get an error here, arithmetic exception, because all, if you catch using the superclass call exception, the child class details also already, so you don't have to worry about that, but that is a very bad practice. So that is what we have to do. You get error here because the exception class is already caught, so that is why you can't quote it again. So don't use a super class. So use the child classes for individual exception types. So then there's a finally block which will be executing the codes no matter what. So even the try catch blocks break occurs, like except for system.sheet, it will execute the try catch and the finally. So this will execute always executed regardless of what happened in the try blocks. But if you use the system.sheet method, now look at it. Even if you get an exception, the final block will be running. So this will run. So this will run. That block will definitely run whether you got exception or not. So you can see that when you run it, so this will definitely run. But if you write something called system.sheet, then it is not going to run. So that is to forcefully execute the program. Now when you system.sheet, this will run part will not going to execute. You can see that cannot divide by 0 and execute the program. So that is why except the system.sheet, the finally block will run no matter the condition that you can see. So that is how you can catch some exceptions in the program. So something like this. So then, like we discussed in the lecture today, we can use the throw and customize exception, user generated exception, by using a throw keyword and the object you like to have. Example, I can say throw new arithmetic exception, and within the double quotation you can test an exception like this. So let's one example. So I'm going to take your mid marks. Like if your marks is less than 13.5, you have to sit for the final, like the supplementary exam. So for that, in order to do it, what we can do is we have to use the scan class, obviously. So we can generate a custom generated messages. So usually scan class object, let's create it. So this is the scan class. So we can ask enter your mid marks. So simple logic. So I can say integer mid is equal start next. If your marks is less than like let's take a float value, next float, and let's make it float. So if your marks is actually less than 13.5, that is less than 45%, we have to sit for the supplementary exam. Like we can write a custom exception for this, like error. If the mid marks is less than 13.5, you have to sit for the supplementary exam. So we can, rather than printing a message, we have to throw an arithmetic exception. We can say throw new arithmetic exception, and within bracket we can say like kind of a message. I can say sit for supplementary, like that's kind of a message. So then once you throw it, you have to catch it using the try catch. You can put a try catch block to catch the error. Arithmetic exception, and print the message. You can say ex dot get message, like you can print it some message you like to have. So this is like you can print a custom message, custom exception for your program. Like this is not a actual logic, right? This is not arithmetic error, but you can sit for the supplementary exam if your marks is less than 13.5. You can say like this. So when you enter your marks, let's say your marks is 7.5, just print sit for the supplementary exam. So that is the custom message we have put here, so that we can print using the get message. So that is the customized message that we can generate using the throw keyword. Now here in the morning session, like the 12 o'clock, when we discuss, we throw it in the main method like that, right? But if you customizedly throw it, that is not compulsory. You can just throw it the way you like to have it. So just condition based on that, we can try catch block. Now if you don't have this block, that's another problem. So you have to have a try catch block to catch that separate exception. But this is not a good example. The reason is this is not an arithmetic exception. We can say mid mark is not enough exception, like a custom name for our class. If you want, we can create it that. Let's see how to do that later. But like try to write it like this. This is how you generate a custom generate message. Like this is your mark is less than 13.5. We can throw a new exception. We can call it as an arithmetic exception and saying that you need to sit for the supplementary and catch it in the catch block. So make a note of this. So then I'll teach you how to do the customized exception class. Like this is how you generate your own logic for your exception, right? Just throw it and the error type you like to have and catch it in the block. Now this is not a meaningful because this is not a usual arithmetic exception. For that we can create a customized class. rather than writing arithmetic exception, we can generate our own custom exception class using this class name given. So let's say mid marks not enough exception. So I'm going to create a class called mid marks not enough, and I don't need these comments. We can just delete it. So this is an exception that we want to say. Like if your marks is less than 31, not an arithmetic exception, we can say mid marks not enough. If you catch it like this, there's a problem because you get an error. It says that there is not an exception class. The reason is we have to say this is an what kind of exception. So you have to use the keyword that we always use, that is inheritance from the superclass. And we have discussed something like this, like what kind of exception, whether it is an SQL error, IO error, runtime error, or null point error, other unchecked exceptions. So I'm going to say this is a runtime exception. If your mid marks is less enough, we can say it's a runtime exception. So runtime only exception occurs. So I can say the error type where you want to have it. I can say runtime exception. You can say runtime exception. So that means this is from the superclass called runtime exception. So I can save it as mid marks not enough. I'm going to say public class mid marks not enough. And now the error is gone, but here you have to have a constructor to set the supplementary value. So we can have a constructor. I can say public mid marks not enough exception. I'm going to take the error type. So you from the user. Now that is taken from the user, and you can print it to the user as an error message. So like this, right? So you can get that error message, and you can set it as the error message. You can say this dot set. You can't set it. Yeah. So error message usually like rather than printing like sit for supplementary exam here, which is actually not the proper standard. Like we don't want to generate a customized constructor. We can generate something called at override. So this is an override method. So I can say public string and say get message. So get message. You can also generate it using this automatic conversion. So you can right click and insert code. You can generate a method. Something like get message. So when you generate it, you can say this is a message that we can just generate it. So rather than generating the message here, we pass it as a parameter in the early example. Now we can generate the message here. You can say return, since it's a string. It's like a string, two string method. You can return it. You can say your mid marks is not greater than 45%, likewise. So if you write like this way, now we can have a fully working customized exception. See, now this is a mid marks not enough exception. This is earlier the exception is actually something that we generated, system generated one. Like if your marks is 12.5, says your mid marks is not greater than 45%, it will be printing that message because we just generate the message. So this is what we call it as generating customized exception. So using the, you have to use this throws keywords, which is here. Here, look at this. I had to use throw keyword and generate the exception to the user. So this is a custom error message that we can see to the user. You can just pick whatever the class you have as a super class and generate the customized message. Something like this, you can just generate it. You can say like If your inputs are invalid, we can just throw a new exception and catch it there. Like you asking the user some input, and if it is invalid, you can just throw it using the catch block. So that is also possible. Yeah. So what I did is like this, right? You can write if condition for the logic that you want to have. Now here, I just took the marks of your midterm, like here. You can ask the user enter your mid marks. So once you get the mid marks, like the rule is like if your marks is less than 13.5, you should get an A. So in that case, rather than printing, we can just write the keyword called throw and use new the exception name. Now, so far we have written like arithmetic exception, array index out of bound exception, null pointers. Likewise, those are the errors that we can get. But nowadays, we can generate a new Java class by creating a Java class in the package. And I can give it like mid marks not enough exception. Just give it a name. And you have to indicate using the super class like extends saying what type of error, whether it is SQL or runtime or like kind of errors. So you can see it in here, the error types, whether it is runtime, arithmetic, SQL, or logic exception. So you can select the error category and make it as super class. And you can write the override method, that is the get message method that we just printed our message to the screen, the customized message you like to have. Then when you run it, when your marks are less than 13.5, they throw a customized exception. It's not a normal exception that we generate using PyCatch. It's a user created exception. Yeah. So is that clear now, Shreya? Yes. So in the labs today, what we are going to do is we are going to handle those errors, right? So how to catch the exception using PyCatch. Uh, so for that, you need to have this lab sheet. So I'll show you that. So get the like when you meet at 3 o'clock, you should be able to prepare with this. Get the unit test completed lab sheet and come. So that is the last lab we are going to do today. After that, like we'll do a revision on the next week. Like before your like like the final exam. Once the final exams are over, we'll have a additional lab for the SQL data connection, like how to connect your database to the SQL server. Because otherwise, like if you do it now, the point is we are not asking that for the final exam. That's no point, and that is only helpful for your group projects. So that is why we thought of doing it after the final. So be prepared for that, and make sure you come at 3 o'clock for today's lab session. So that's basically how you catch the exceptions using throw keywords to catch it there, right? So other than that, you can catch the errors in methods like this as well. You can try them. So this is the end of the Java subject, right? So actually, the syllabus is 14-week long. If you open the like the syllabus, like you can see the 14 week that we have completed. Like Oracle certification program, if you open it, like this is the SC program 1 first examination, Java SC1. Like if you see the syllabus, like we have covered most of like almost everything, right? Like you can see that from the beginning. Building blocks like if condition, like those things, operators, APIs, methods, encapsulation, how to design a class, how to write exceptions, everything is there. And other than that, you have some question you can practice. So I recommend you to do some practice questions from this book, not for the exam also, but for your like see how to try catch blocks that we discussed. Uh, so you can try some examples and come. Right at 2 o'clock now. Remember 2 to 3. There's a tutorial at OOAD. So Nireshika told you to come there. There's an additional tutorial that you have to do. So at 3 o'clock we'll meet you in the lab link of the Zoom. So I'll give you 15 minutes break for the. You can take a rest and join to the OOAD sessions. We'll meet you at 3 o'clock until 5 we'll do how to do the final exception labs. So make sure your NetBeans IDs and the project is ready. So then see you at uh, 3 o'clock. So make sure you join to the double links. Thank you.